I would just frame it slightly differently, because I think that you can frame the values question in a way that becomes kind of a more practical set of decisions. And simply and starkly put, the question would be, is there a price that's too high to pay for security that forces you to you say, you know what, I don't want to go down that path. I need to go down this path in order to achieve security. So that's really what I mean. Not that Israel's values.
But Israel doesn't. I mean, Israel consistently hasn't done what it could do for its security,
right.
Which is to say, I mean, the American program, the Canadian program, the Australian program, the Argentinian program was kill everybody who lived there and take over their land.
Right.
That's a good way to make yourself safe.
Right.
Put the Indians on reservations.
Right. And that's why they don't have this. That's why we don't have this problem, and they do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a group of people moving from one place to another place finds people living there. There's different ways of dealing with that. Right. Israel has dealt with it not in the way that most countries that we think of and admire dealt with it. And so, you know, there's an interesting. I'm just sort of working this through in my mind right now, but there's this cowboy Indian kind of approach to understanding the Middle East, in which the Jews are both the cowboys and the Indians. They're the Indians in the sense that one of the reasons that Israel is such a challenge for people to understand is that this hasn't happened before. A dead people has not come back to life and gone back to the place it was from 2,000 years after the fact. So imagine if a group of 500,000 Seminole Indians, not that there are 500,000 Seminole Indians obviously, in Oklahoma decided one day that they were tired of Oklahoma and they decided to walk back to Florida. And they went to, you know, Jacksonville and Tampa and Fort Lauderdale and knocked on people's houses and said, excuse me, you're living in my house. I'd like it back now. You know, the Jews are the Seminoles in that regard, right? And the Palestinians would be the white people, the black people in Florida are like, no, you can't have my house. I've lived here for 200 years. What are you talking about? Or the cowboy frame is obviously the one we're talking about, which is, you know, that the Israelis came and there was a people living in the land already, and they had to figure out how to deal with that. But Israel hasn't gone down the road of moving Palestinians out in large numbers. You know, there was an opportunity right after the Six-Day War to push everybody onto the West Bank. They didn't do it. You know, they didn't do it because I think because they have Jewish values. I think that sometimes this is not to apologize for Israeli excesses, of which there have been many, and many stupid mistakes, but it's a way of saying, you know, Israel's in the predicament it's in because it has limited itself in the bandwidth or the spectrum of responses it can have to the threat it faces.
So actually, I wasn't gonna dwell this long on the kind of internal situation, but since you just brought something up that because it's Yom Yerushalayim, that 1967 moment I think is worth exploring for just another moment. I don't know if it's in Michael Oren's book on 1967, but he presents this kind of very stark choice that the Israelis had as to you know, whether to make this strategic move and take over the territories, and in the course of a larger conflict. And you know, you can present the current day situation from having emerged from this decision as the tide was turning in that war, and as the Israelis were kind of gaining the upper hand, to just sort of take what they could. Is Israel kind of tragically locked in a set of circumstances that flowed out of 1967, or is there a path?
Well, yes, and part of it has been involuntary, and part of it has been voluntary, in the sense that Israel, through the settlement program, tried to swallow this territory, but it's choking on it. You know, that's the problem. The temptation after 67, I mean, you understand this, and I think we all understand it. In May or June 4th, 1967, the Israelis thought they were going to be slaughtered. They were going to die. They were, literally all going to die. They were going to get killed. By June 10th, the Israelis were in control of the Temple Mount. The Jewish people wanted the Temple Mount as sovereigns for the first time in 2,000 years. That was a destabilizing, emotionally and spiritually, theologically. That was a very destabilizing moment. It's a moment we're still dealing with. Some people succumb to the temptation to say this was God's hand at work, and therefore we should go back. And we all know whether or not we're Jewish people who want to cede the West Bank back to the Arabs. We all know that that's Jewish territory.
Right.
I mean, it's where the stories of the Bible don't take place in Tel Aviv. They take place up in the mountains. And so that temptation was great. And so there was this move, and the government's acquiesced to this by the religious right, by the national religious right, to start to try to swallow these territories. And so the question is, are we now choking on those territories? I think yes. You know, and it's sort of, when you try to make statecraft through theological means, it can have really profound consequences. So yeah. The truth is, Israel tried to get rid of this territory at many different points, and the Arabs didn't want to deal with it. That's one of the unfair aspects of the way we talk about the Middle East now. We always talk about Israel's responsibility in this problem. We never talk about how we came to this point.
The other Arab states or the Palestinians.
Yeah, the Arab states, the Palestinians. Look, I mean, the Arabs could have gotten the territory back by August of 1967. But when they met in Khartoum, the Arab League met in Khartoum, and they said no to recognition, no to negotiations, no to peace. And some Israelis then took that as, well, it's ours, I guess, because they don't want it back. Right. They don't want to deal with this in a way that would get it back.
It's true. We do kind of simplify and dehistoricize it, as you were saying the other night. We don't kind of look at what has happened over the last 40 years. I feel like it might be a good time to take questions. What do you think?
Sure.